Podcasting from the base of Lake Tahoe in the eastern Sierras comes the Medicine Wheel. We are a group of progressive physicians seeking solutions and enlightenment while surfing the seas of big data and summiting mountains of research in an effort to make the practice of medicine more personal and medical knowledge more accessible, and empower you, the listener, to be as healthy as possible. Now, the Medicine Wheel.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Medicine Wheel. Today I have the great pleasure of introducing and interviewing a good friend of mine and a wisdom keeper who lives here locally in the Tahoe area, as well as residing down in Southern California in San Diego. His name is Greg Rex, and I want to welcome you here to the Medicine Wheel, Greg.
Thanks, Doc.
You bet. So I've read through your resume, and I'm impressed at multiple levels, but it really does sound like you went from a kind of a bump and grind, hard driving business guy with some real, goals in mind when you were younger, and there was a pretty significant evolution in how you developed as a person from the time you were in your 20s until now, and you're a very young looking middle-aged gentleman, and so that's wonderful. Tell me a little bit about that journey and how it all got started.
Well, I think there was a big passion of mine always to learn and to be the best and to find the best in certain fields and to emulate them and model them. Just one little anecdote of stories, like when I was young, I wanted to get a paper route. So instead of just taking the first one, I went around and interviewed a bunch of paper route drivers and see who had the best one with the flattest route with everything. And then I mentored with him. I was his apprentice. I was his sub for a year, waiting for him to retire so that I could inherit this route. So I've always had this kind of philosophy of find the best person. When I don't know if I ever told you this, but I was pre-med, and I was actually going to be a doctor. I had on my driver's license, on my truck, it says Dr. G. Rex. And I was like the chairman of the Pre-Med Society. I was working at the hospital, at the Naval Hospital, as a corpsman to get some experience in there and to help pay for college, because I came from a very modest middle-class family, and I was pretty much paying my own way through college. So I thought the GI Bill would help. And now that my dad's in medicine and I'm working in the hospital all the time, I have access to hundreds of doctors, and I'm asking them, hey, I'm getting ready to graduate. I got one more year left. If you were me, what would you do? And all my mentors and my heroes, the people I'm looking up to, said, if I were you, I wouldn't go into medicine. And this was back in 1987.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? And they were telling me I can't do what I want to do. I can't practice. My hands are tied by the administration, by the insurance companies. It's like, it's all about sickness and disease. And I just got through being a patient. And I actually was killed by a medical complication. I was dead, flatlined for 5 minutes. And I had that experience that people talk about. Now, interestingly, I have had multiple near-death experiences. From the age of 1, I had one. At the age of 2, I had one. I was in a coma at the age of 3 for 5 days. I've had multiple near-death experiences. So I've always had this unique, weird passion for spirituality. But my only experience of that was the Catholic Church. I was an altar boy. I was brought up in a very middle-class traditional family with wonderful parents that are, great faith Christians. But that was my paradigm of spirituality, was Catholic Church. So when I looked at my life, and I was at this crossroads, and I said, I can't go into medicine. I said, I can't do what just happened to me. I can't put someone through that. I want to be in the health field. And everywhere I look in medicine, it's sick care.
Right.
So I decided to go into personal development. And I started learning these principles. I started with the basics: Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends, Influence People, Napoleon Hill, the real classics. And then I stumbled into Tony Robbins. And the universe had it out that I was going to find my way. And he was one person I sought out. I read his book, and I said, this guy's got it figured out. I want to learn from him. I love personal development. I love studying and learning and being the best I could be. So I called up the guy and said, hey, I want to get a job. And he says, come down for an interview. And I sold myself in. I got hired up, and it was a great ride. It was a phenomenal ride. It was Rookie of the Year. It was, learned and grew and everything. But as you said, I was very much in the striving mindset. It was like, success was mostly external for me. It was, millionaire, looking good, being smart, winning. It was all about winning. And the spiritual part of my life was kind of on the back burner. It was hidden. If I ever did it, it was in the corner, because I had kind of separated from my passion for the church. Mm-hmm. I was like, this isn't working for me. I need to find a different form of spirituality. And what ended up being for me was like an indigenous shamanic kind of form of spirituality, where people would consider me a pagan.
Right.
Like, I believe in nature. Like,
Right.
You're
a Catholic pagan.
I study the indigenous ways. I study what I call animism, and very few people even know what that is, but it's a universal premise. It's like the original spiritual belief of all humanity. No matter what continent you're on, they all had the same thing. If you asked them what was God, they would say Father Sky, the masculine, and Mother Earth, the feminine, together are the creator. You can't have one without the other. There's no such thing as just life without Mother Earth, and there's no such thing without life from Father Sky and the sun and the energy that animates everything. So for them, there was this harmony between masculine and feminine. And then we were the children of Father Sky and Mother Earth, so therefore we should live in harmony on this nature. Everything was our brothers. The trees were our brothers, the animals were our brothers, everything had spirit, everything was divine. And I really resonate with that. That really resonates with me. And so I've been looking around, and I've loved this show. I mean, just the medicine wheel concept. I mean, every single shamanic tradition has the 4 directions, has the 4 elements, has the medicine wheel. They all understand there's this natural process of life that's happening, and if you can align with it, if you can harmonize with nature, if you can harmonize with the masculine and feminine, anything is possible, because that's where the creative magic is.
Yeah, absolutely. You brought up so many wonderful things, and the fact of the matter is I want to go down the rabbit hole on each and every one. But let's start off with your experience with Tony Robbins. And a lot of people know him as sort of a mentor to businesses, to individuals on a variety of levels. Now, you talked earlier on with me in private about this process called modeling, and it was one of the key features of his training and his programs that you took home with you and applied to your life. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, when people ask me, what was your experience with Tony? It was an amazing experience. Like I said, I met so many amazing people. I learned so much. He's an amazing person. He's got a passion beyond. And one of his best gifts is, like, his most innate natural talent is this concept of modeling, like learning from other people, distilling it down into something that other people can apply. And that's what he was really good at. That's what Power Talk was all about. He would interview Deepak Chopra or John Wooden or Norman Cousins, all these like legendary people, and he would take their bodies of knowledge, 20, 30 years, distill it down to these 3 fundamental things. He said, if you could model somebody's belief systems, find out their philosophy, how they think about things, their strategies, their how they execute, and then you model their actions and behaviors, you can duplicate success that would normally take years. Like we used to teach this thing called, wood breaking. We take wood and we break it karate style. Normally people go to karate classes for a year or 2 before they attempt something like that. We can teach someone, because we know the fundamental 3 principles, we can teach someone how to do it in an hour.
Wow.
With almost 100% success rate. So what I learned from him is this process of modeling. I learned how to learn. And I think that's the most valuable thing you can have today. Eric Hoffer said, in the world of rapid change that we live in, the learners will inherit the earth, while the learned are well equipped for a world that no longer exists.
Right.
So what Tony taught me, and then what subsequent mentors have taught me, and having this philosophy of being a mentee, wanting to learn from a master, finding who's the best in that field, and then studying from them, that's my fundamental premise. So I had a tool on how to be a great mentor, how to be a great mentee, right? How to model the master and how to get out of them the fastest, the quickest, and the best. And then for 5 years, I went on the road and I interviewed the best of the best, and I sat down with hundreds, maybe thousands of CEOs, presidents, vice presidents, directors of sales, and I interviewed, what does it take to be successful? How did you get to this position? If I wanted to be like you when I grow up, what would I think? What would I do? And I'm interviewing, just gathering data, and it's just going into my subconscious as, here's what successful people do. So that was probably my biggest thing. I learned how to learn, I learned how to model, and I learned how to teach others that model, because once you simplify things down to a model, it's easy to learn, easy to teach.
Sure. Now, when you talked about the belief system, you also talked a little bit about strategies and strategization, as well as taking action. And so when you integrated all those three things along with this distillate process you went through of gleaning this wisdom and practices of these successful entrepreneurs, how did it show up for you? What did that look like for you? Because I know as an individual, how we work in the world can be very unique.
Great question. What I started noticing were patterns. And that's maybe one of my gifts. I say, sometimes, by the way, if your readers or listeners have never heard of the book, Now Discover Your Strengths, it's a great book, and it's a great process where you read the book and you focus on what are your strengths, your innate, like almost God-given abilities. They call them strengths. And there's a test you can take. If you buy the book, there's a little test to take the Strength Finders test. It's online, and it gives you your top 5 strengths. And so one of mine is that I have the ability to recognize patterns. And I have the ability to, so what happens is I look back at this database and I started saying, okay, what are those consistent patterns? What's the frequently answers? I'm asking, what does it take to be successful? Then I started looking at what does it take to be successful long-term, sustainable? Because I started noticing that there was 2 types of success. There was a type of success that people would have that would be cyclical. They would have success and they would lose it and they'd have to rebuild, right? And then there's the kind of success that people had to have, but the only way they could have it was to almost kill themselves. So in essence, it wasn't sustainable because they were burning out. So I started really looking at what does it take to create sustainable, like almost harmonic success. And I started like filtering for those things. And I started seeing a different paradigm. And for me, one of the shifts that it applied to me is when I would apply like the traditional mainstream theories, they almost never worked. I have always been a self-reliant, I'm going against the grain. If everyone's going left, I want to go right just to see what's there, and so when I started looking at this kind of like this pattern of burning out that was happening, it happened to me. It happened to me because I was driving. I had actually went to one of Tony's events. It's called Date with Destiny, and it's about looking at your values. And what I did was I unconsciously threw out my real core values of who I was and tried to emulate Tony and tried to adopt what I thought his values would be. I tried to tell myself, I want to be like Tony, then I'm going to think like Tony. And I took this modeling thing and I applied it in a way that was incongruent with my spirit. And I ended up taking, which is my highest value, which has always been fun and adventure, and I took it off the list and I replaced it with achievement and intellect and all these other values that were totally external. And they were pretentious and they were like, they weren't authentic for me. So then I went through a period of about 10 years where I almost killed myself, where I brewed myself into the ground. I got 50 pounds overweight, $100,000 in debt, went through all these corporate, corporate grind. And I got to my dark night of the soul.
Talk about that. That's critical. And that term brings up a lot of images for people. For you, what was it? What was the thing that you said, this is my dark night?
I can remember the exact moment. It was down in Costa Rica. I got laid off. It was after 9/11. So I was with this .com company. We were doing very well. We couldn't do anything wrong. The investors were just throwing money at us. We were dominating the field. And then the .com bubble popped. And then things got crazy. And we went from we built a sales force up to like 200 people, and we had to shrink it down to 60 people just to make overhead. We had to increase our revenue with, instead of 200 people, with 60 people. And we had to like totally change everything. So it was a grind. And then we merged with this other company. And then the leadership, here's where I think the breakdown is we had a real spiritual visionary leadership at the beginning. But then when we merged with this other company, we got this megalomaniac, ego-driven. He was a colonel in the Air Force, and it was his way or the highway, and he was like, it was brutal. And that energy of that like scarcity, fear-based, control-based leadership, it was the beginning of the end. Like even though we turned it all around, we lost ourselves in the process. So I got through like all these different transitions in my personal life, and I got laid off. and was down into Costa Rica, and I'm walking down this path, and I see this Costa Rican guy, and he's fit and healthy and smiling ear to ear, and he says, "Pura vida." And I said, "Hey," and I smiled back, and then I kind of looked at him, and I thought, like, I want that life. He's got pigs in the front yard, papayas in his back. He's got a simple life. He's connected with nature. He's happy. He's healthy. He's passionate. It's like, and here I am getting ready to go back to the corporate grind. I just got laid off. I'm $100,000 in debt. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to go back to corporate. I've thrown out my values. I've lost who I am, right? I'm chasing the millionaire status. And I can't even surf. I'm so overweight. I'm 50 pounds overweight at this point because of all the stress and just being depressed and using food for my, my escape. I'm 50 pounds overweight, and I'm the best surf I've ever seen in my life, and I'm too fat to catch waves.
Oh.
And I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm at my lowest point.
Right.
I'm at my lowest point. And I'm like, I can't go back to the corporate grind. I got to find something else. I got to find a way to get balance. I got to change my viewpoint of success. And I kind of restructured my values, going back to what's true for me. And my new definition of success was, how do I find harmony and balance and simplify my life? And at that point, I had just started a business with my best friend called the Happy, Healthy, Wealthy Game. And we were focused on three things: healthy body, healthy mind, and healthy finances, this trilogy. And here I was walking around the forest, and I'm seeing 3 frogs, 3 monkeys, 3 birds. Everywhere I look, I kept seeing this pattern of 3. And I go, gosh, the universe is sending me a signal. That's where it wants me to focus on this trilogy. So I went and I put my focus on that, on simplifying my life and getting that in order. And next thing you know, I meet a doctor who is like, to this day, in my opinion, he is the Michael Jordan of health and well-being. He's like Tony for personal development. He's the Tony for business, for health. He studies everything. He knows, he's like massive, and he really understands health, not sickness. Right. And so I partner up with him, and he's got this vision to start this company, this coaching company. And I said, that's exactly what I've always been looking for. I've been waiting for this business for 10 years. Because I remember I met one of Tony's friends, who's Paul Pilzer, and he wrote the book, the Wellness Revolution, which is a phenomenal book. And I've been looking for 10 years to find a company that I could start something in the wellness space, but I didn't have the right vehicle. So here I am. I meet this guy. I'm 50 pounds overweight. He has this vision. I'm like, this could be it. So I jumped on board. We partnered up, and the rest is history. It's, as they say, I lost my 50 pounds. I got all of the negative debt paid off. I started a coaching business with him, and we've built it to now over 20,000 coaches nationwide, helping over million of people plus, helping them with our company. And we figured out, what does it take to create sustainable lifestyle changes. And instead of trying to fix the healthcare system, which I was trying to do, I was wanting to kind of like fix the healthcare system. I can't. It's a machine. But what I can do is I can offer an alternative. I can offer an authentic healthcare system, which is what we've created. It's called Optavia, and it's a lifestyle and well-being company that teaches people how to organize their life around what matters most to them and create habits of health so that they can have lifelong transformation. But we do it just, baby steps, one habit at a time. So my journey was to get my own health in order first, and then start really taking what I learned with Tony and applying it to that field.
Great. Well, you bring up something really important. It's the sort of one step at a time concept. For many people, especially the patients I deal with, I see a challenge to get folks onto a pathway of compliance. And I don't use compliance like I want to control what they do. I kind of want to make sure that they're educated about the choices they make have an impact on their health. But what's super critical is that our general living style is really unconscious, and we eat unconsciously. We lay around and absorb media unconsciously, and we're really not fully awake in our lives, and I think that is a deterrent to health. And so how do you sort of grab these people by the collar and say, hey, listen, you're 60, 70, 100 pounds overweight, you can't work, you're in chronic pain, you're simply miserable, you're in a terrible relationship. Like, how do you unwind that mess? And there's so many people out there that are in that mess that they can't see straight.
It's a great question, because they do layer on top of each other. These challenges and patterns and unhealthy habits, they layer on top of each other. We have a term that Dr. A coined. It's called the Obesogenic Society. Is that right now, unfortunately, we live, obesogenic means it's basically the environment is designed to move us towards obesity if you're not highly conscious. And unfortunately, that's the reality. Some of the things you said, the media, the conditioning, the information that's out there. So you have to really stand guard. You have to be conscious. The answer to your question is you have to bring everything into consciousness. Compliance is a funny word. If you actually get into that, what we found with coaching is that if you get into what's called an up one, down one, like an authoritative relationship where I know what's best for you, and if you do this, you'll get off your medicine and you won't have diabetes, and if you don't do this, you're going to have diabetes. And so if you get into this like authoritative mindset, people will either comply temporarily because of the external pressure, or they'll defy. And it's just like raising kids. If you tell them what to do, they'll either do it when you're watching. They'll be good while you're watching, but the minute you turn their back, they're going to defy, right? Because they want to test it. So what we found is instead of taking that authoritative, we try to take an empathetic approach. An empathetic approach focuses on intrinsic motivation instead of extrinsic fears, carrots and sticks. Right. And so it takes a little longer to get to unravel that, because you have to have enough trust to have a heart-to-heart with somebody. Yeah. And the other thing is you have to be able to let go as a coach. This is one of the hardest things as a coach, is when I know I can help somebody and I know I can totally transform their lives, but they're not ready. And so as a side-by-side empathetic coach, we have to put ourselves in their shoes, and we have to walk in their shoes and say, you know what, if they're not ready, they're not ready. Yeah. And if I can't, and so the answer to that difficult question, which is the $1 million question, is we're working on it. We're getting really good at it. But it's to help the person get to choice, not compliance. Compliance is extrinsic, sure. Right? Help them get to the fundamental choice where their health is a real priority, and then they can start taking little baby steps, and they can start building one healthy habit at a time. But they have to make that fundamental choice that their health is a priority, and they have to see that the consequences is, here's the consequences. If we do this, here's what we can predict. If we do this lifestyle, here's what we can predict. And not be attached to which one they choose, but saying, I'm here for you. Either way, I'm more happy to help you in this field where we're preventing and we're eliminating the need for these medicines because we're changing our lifestyle. I'll support you over here, but I would, my recommendation would be consider this. And if you have something for them to move into, like, and I know you do, you offer all kinds of things that help, not just the physical, chemical imbalances, but about the whole mind, body, spirit. And that's one of the big shifts for me recently, is it with my book, is I went from having, you've probably seen this, how there's the mind, body, spirit trilogy? Yeah. That's what a lot of people focus on. Well, our company's focused on mind, body, finances. We took on the philosophy that said, hey, if somebody's financial career life is out of balance, it's going to affect their health, it's going to affect their relationships, it's going to affect everything. It's all connected. So our trilogy was healthy body, healthy mind, healthy finances. And the other trilogy that I've noticed out there is the mind, body, spirit. And those people are really typically fulfilled and happy, and they're working on their mind and their spiritual life. But they actually, because they don't have any financial grounding, they often struggle in that area. So, and then the ones that are over here, like me, burning it out, grinding it, mind, body, finances, I'm lacking that fulfillment. And so for me, what I've always been doing in the past was pursuing these studies, but in private, because they were alternative. Like right now, this is I've done hundreds of interviews. This is the first time I've ever talked about animism. Yeah, this is the first time I've ever talked about me, like, kind of moving away from the Catholic Church and finding my own form of spirituality, because it's a stigma, and the big majority of the country in the world is very traditional and judgmental. And so I've had like a fear of coming out about how I really practice spirituality. So I have shaman that I've studied with for decades that people don't even know about, that are different traditions. But now I'm at the point in my life where I really don't care what people think about me, and I'm just going to do what makes me happy. And so in my book, I came out with, instead of having the trilogy, it's the tetralogy. which is 4 things: healthy body, healthy mind, healthy finances, and healthy spirit. And that is actually one of the reasons why I picked the trilogy in the first place, because I saw the triangle as this like very sacred geometry. It's like, oh, it's a stable structure. But in reality, when I think about it, the triangle doesn't exist in reality. It's a 2-dimensional concept. It only exists on paper.
Sure.
In reality, a triangle is a tetrahedron.
It's a pyramid, yeah.
It's a 3-dimensional, 4 elements. It has 4 points.
Yeah.
And that is the most simple, stable structure in the universe. So what I was striving for back then is to find what's the simplest way to organize my life. And I picked the magic 3. Well, now I'm really focused on spirit, and I'm bringing that into the conversation. So I'm now having conversations with clients. It's like, how's your spiritual life? How do you feel connected to nature? What grounds you? Where's your fulfillment? Where's your, what's your significance? Where's your purpose in giving back? Where are you finding that joy in life? So when I have that more comprehensive conversation with people, we're starting to find that people can make those changes and make those choices, thinking about long-term health, thinking about their happiness, and seeing how it's all connected.
Yeah. Well, you bring up something that, of course, I have some familiarity with, but it's not part of my practice in medicine, is the financial component. Very rarely do I counsel, my patients on finances. How do you see that integrated with the other 3? Because obviously I'm familiar with the other 3, but the financial component is something that's in some ways a little bit sort of taboo and something we're not even trained in to chat about. But what is critically important is compliance, whether it be, with a medication or following through with a surgery or procedure or rehab, physical therapy, may truly depend on their financial health. And their financial health can completely eliminate options for these folks for care, like with stem cells. I mean, that's something that's new and budding in the industry of medicine and may provide great relief for people.
Did for me.
It's helped you, but at the end of the day, 95% of the people probably can't even afford it.
Yeah, because it's not covered by
Yeah,
insurance.
it's not covered by
cash.
insurance.
Yeah. So that's another taboo. I mean, in my family, we rarely talked about finances. And, I got picked up a lot of negative philosophies about successful people must be, greedy, and, money is the root of all evil. And I had to actually reshift my thinking about money. I think a lot of people have those paradigms. So therefore, it's like the mind, body, spirit people have almost sense of judgment that if you are financially wealthy, then you're obviously not spiritual. There's like this really weird dichotomy, and I see that same taboo with sex. Sex is such a sacred, important thing, but we don't talk about it. There's no education. There's no awareness. There's no relationship with it. And then what we end up picking up is what they show us on TV or in porn or whatever. Same with finances. What we pick up is what's on the media. And we haven't studied it. So I think that it's not common for a health professional.
Right.
But what we do know, here's what we do know. We do know, like looking at the Gallup studies on wellness and well-being, we do know that somebody's engagement at work is one of the highest predictors of mental well-being, is whether you enjoy the work you do. We know that when people are in scarcity mode where they can't make their bills, we know when they're in fear, their cortisol, adrenaline, their body is in a fight or flight mode, and they're not at their optimal level. So there's definitely philosophies around finances and wealth that are missing for people. And then there's skills that are missing, like to how to be interactive with money. And I try to, I work with people in like little baby steps on those too. And I can tell you right now, there's a couple books that I would recommend for your readers that would just get them started on the journey. One is The Richest Man in Babylon.
Okay.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I have. And who's that by?
Clayson.
Clayson, okay.
And it is, it's an old parable, and it's an easy, fun read. And he teaches these fundamental principles that I started applying that have truly changed my life. Another great series is the Rich Dad series by Sharon Lechter and Robert Kiyosaki. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, especially I like for entrepreneurs, because I'm an entrepreneur, is the second book, Cash Flow Quadrants. But these books, Unlimited Wealth by Paul Pilzer, totally changed my paradigm of thinking about business and wealth and how to create it. But there's definitely some philosophies that have spirit built into them, like Paul Pilzer, for example. The subtitle of his book, Unlimited Wealth, The Theory of Economic Alchemy. And the first half of the book, he spends debunking the concept of scarcity. He goes and he just totally annihilates the idea that there is even such a thing as scarcity. And he'll take it even to the degree of like, oh yeah, but what about resources and minerals? What about oil? There's this finite amount. And he's all, no, because the technology of the day determines what a resource is or isn't. Like, 100 years ago, sand was sand. Now we turn it into silicon chips. Right? 100 years ago, oil was whale oil.
Right.
And he'll read you these articles, his headlines, is the shortage of oil, the world's going to come to an end. And you see those same shortages when we have the oil petroleum crisis in the 70s. And then they said, okay, in the 70s, there's this big world study on how much oil's left. And they said, okay, we've got 20 years left at the current consumption rate and da-da-da-da-da-da. But they didn't take into mind that the skills and the capacity to extract oil would go up, and then our fuel injections would come out. Next thing you know, we're not running on the same old carburetors, and then we double our fuel, we cut half our fuel consumption. So now it's a changing thing. So what defines a resource? Knowing that there is a scarce amount if you think that there's a scarce amount of things, just like if you think there's only one God, and your God is the right God and everyone else's God is the wrong God, when you have that fundamental premise of scarcity, it causes a chain reaction of behavior in society that could actually be very, very detrimental.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up, it's true, and it is a belief system, and ultimately it's the story that we tell ourselves that could disenfranchise us from potentially being very successful on a wide variety of levels. And what you say around scarcity is critically important because so many people are raised in that environment. They think, well, the milk's gone, there's not enough milk, okay? And then you get a little older and that we don't have enough paper for that, or you've got to turn that off because it's wasting electricity, or we could be out of something. And I think that becomes a mindset for a lot of people, and therefore people work out of fear to generate something, a commodity that they're going to be able to exchange for other things, and all that is a vicious cycle. And I was raised in that same situation. So how did you end up breaking that? Is there some sort of paradigm shift that has to take place for whether it's ourselves or our clients or patients, for them to wake up to the fact that there is more to this than grubbing away at a 9-to-5 job just to make a few bucks to pay some bills that we're overextended for and with a mountain of debt? And when you look at our population, 80% of the folks don't even have $1,000 or more in savings, and these millennials have little or no savings. And if they lose their job, they're under dire circumstances and they're moving back in with their parents. It's really a crazy time now.
Yeah, I think that going back to being a learner, I think the number one skill that our next generation can have is the ability to learn. Because, when our parents grew up, and to some degree our generation, you had mostly one career your whole life. Paul Pilzer told me, this was even 5-10 years ago, the average current adult has 7 different careers, not jobs.
Wow.
7 different careers. You're going to go from being a teacher to a consultant to a nurse you're going to move around over the course of your lifetime. That's the new reality.
Yeah.
And the new reality is, check this out. What percentage of California, the state of California, who filed for their taxes, what percentage of them do you think works a 9-to-5 job? What would you guess?
50% maybe?
50%. That's a good guess. Nationally, it's kind of higher than that. It's even 70, 80%. In California, happens to be 17%.
What? That's insane. So what's everyone else doing?
They've got gigs.
Side hustles, parallel hustles.
No one's doing the 9-to-5 anymore.
Wow.
It's at least the ones who are filing taxes.
Right, sure.
But the thing is that we live in a different society now. We live in a different world. The brick and mortar world is going to crumble down, and if you're holding on to the old ways, you're going to be a dinosaur. So the reality is what can people do? Is they can learn how to learn. They can become a learner. They can learn how to be a mentee. They can learn how to become a mentor. There's this, I think, how do you break the paradigm? So they get on the rat reel and they just settle and they just start running. until they die.
Right.
Okay, and I think that's sad.
Yeah.
Or they get on the rat wheel and they run until they can't run anymore and they fall off, and then they have an opportunity to stand up and find another path than jumping back on the rat wheel like I did.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened to me in Costa Rica. Is I fell off the rat wheel and I said, I'm not willing to jump back on. I'm going to find another path. There's not an easy path. But what happens, I think, is that you take a chance every once in a while. You go for something. You have success, and you prove to yourself that if I can do this, I can do that. And we talked a little bit about rites of passages and things like that. And I think there's midlife crisis is, the dark night of the soul for many people is that for people. But if you are courageous and you think about spirit from a different perspective of the evolution of you as a being, and saying if I can become the best version of myself, if that becomes your definition or your strive for success, is how can I become the best version of myself year after year, month after month, full moon after full moon, aligning with the cycles of life, aligning with, being the best version of yourself. You're going to start taking challenges. You're going to start looking for vision quests. You're going to go and you're going to do the triathlon that you never thought you could do. You're going to write the book you never thought you'd write. You're going to take on some challenges, and that's where breakthroughs happen. That's where the breakthroughs happen, is when you put yourself in a situation where you have to go beyond your comfort zone.
Right. No, I think that's really important. And I think so many of us are complacent and sort of, I guess, quietly dealing with the very common and maybe in some cases boring existences that we have. And
it's pervasive.
It is, and it's sad because you look around to everyone out there and they're on their phones and they're distracted with different entertainments that are just superficial, and it's a way to sort of numb out and to avoid some painful issues and processes that have to happen in order for us to evolve as humans. You brought up two different things, which I would love to explore further. One is the concept of a rite of passage, which in our culture is really non-existent, and then the concept of a vision quest. And I know both of those kind of harken back to native cultures and experiences that you've had some time to explore. Can you talk a little bit more about those?
Yeah, I think that what the common thread when I see with these types of practices is it's instead of going out for information, like in the physical world, having a mentor, having an elder, having a coach, that's a really good thing. In the spiritual world, many traditions, the Toltec tradition, many shamanic traditions teach principles, but they say you've got to go on your own journey and you've got to come up with your own answers. I can't answer this for you. I'm not going to be your guru. Mm-hmm. They say the journey is within. So when you go up on a vision quest, you're going up, typically the most common one is a 4-day fast up on a mountain with a shaman or a wisdom keeper that's going to prepare you for months to get ready for it, help make sure you have the right mindset going up there. And then when you're up there, you're by yourself, just you and nature, and you're praying in essence for information to come to you, for guidance, for that answer to your quest. It's like, what is my calling? Why am I here? Answering those big, deep philosophical questions that humans have been trying to answer forever. And so the vision quest practice is one of going inside and then finding your own true north. And so there's lots of ways to do that. There's some that are more, like very structured, like the one I just described. There's even simple meditation. We've done gatherings at my cabin where, with a TP and some songs and some, fire and different ceremony to go inside and answer them these questions. So I think Vision Quest is a practice that I like to think of doing as like not just once a year, but like I do it regularly, almost daily in some form, little forms, but I also do it very strategically on full moons. Mm-hmm. And solstice and equinoxes. I align with those things, and I really bring ceremony into my. My intention is to make everything sacred, so I can bring spirit and ceremony into everything. And I do that again through more of the traditional indigenous practices.
Great. And now, when we talked about this vision quest as sort of an internal process, now we kind of flip the coin and look at the sort of traditional rite of passage. A lot of times, folks would be sort of pushed to their limits, sort of more physically, mentally, emotionally, versus sort of that spiritual bent. What has been your experience looking at certain rites of passage and the potential benefit of going through a rites of passage?
The only ones that I can really call on are like with sports. So for this different versions of this, and I think this is important, kind of going back to the masculine feminine balance thing. So women gather in circles. They actually, the traditional form for them was the red tent, and so they would go during their moon phase, which is their period, and women would be brought into the elders and the grandmothers and the different generations. They would teach them how sacred their body is and how special it is and how it's nothing to be ashamed of. This is life. Like that period going through you is life. And what does it mean for the different cycles of winter, when everything is flushed away and it's the death cycle, and then spring, new life is being seeded, and then summer, like things are growing and evolving at your peak, and then fall when the leaves are changing and you go back through the cycle. So this is something that they were taught, and it's a beautiful thing. We need that. We need young women in our current society to understand that what's going on with their body is natural and beautiful, and that they're every part of their body is special, and that they don't have to look like a Barbie doll. That we're all unique and beautiful. So all those teachings are valuable. The men typically were on hunt. They're going out and they're very masculine. Very facing death is really what this is about for the man. The man is to go to the emptiness, to the void, where women are looking for that connection, that huddle, that circle of camaraderie and connection. Men are looking for, I'm going to face death in the face, look at my, nose to nose, and I'm going to kick its butt. That's what juices a man. So that's why they go up on the hill alone. That's why they go into battle with warrior. That's what they do when they go into sports. What is it? It's a battle. It's a war. It's like going across this person's territory and taking the flag and, I won. I killed you. That's what this is. So all these rituals, for me, was in the Navy, going through boot camp. Break you down, eliminate your self-ego. You're a part of a unit. It's like all about survival. And so there's some great things that happen through sports and those things. However, they really do condition that very misogynist, very patriarchy kind of authoritative. And I think what's been helpful for me in the last few years is remembering that there's a soft side to me as well, and that even within me, even though I'm a man and I'm relatively masculine, I also have some feminine parts of me that I want to honor within me. So finding the wholeness and the balance of masculine and feminine, this is true for women. Like my sweetheart is very feminine, and one of the things that she wants to really enhance is her connection to her masculine side. So there's certain things that for her to show up and be the best version of herself, she needs to learn how to be focused and not just be like, oh, whatever. Women tend to be very floaty, and she's like, well, I have some things I want to accomplish. And she realizes that if she's constantly in that feminine energy of like bouncing around and going with flow, she's not going to get stuff done. Right. So it's learning how to be the masculine and feminine when you need to, and the rites of passage, I think, give you a chance to tap into who you are by going inside. There's also lots of there's programs that people can look into. There's actually a great program called the Mankind Project.
Yes.
That's one of the only ones that has some good traction that I can refer to.
Yeah, and I've experienced that, and also spent a lot of time with some of those gentlemen, and they are really they're seeking answers to our dysfunctional male culture. And so we talked a little bit about misogyny, and we talked about the toxic masculinity and that energy set that comes from, I think, from a very shallow space within us as men. Can you talk a little bit about not only toxic masculinity, but also kind of the reciprocal side of that, the Me Too movement, sort of how there's been a shifting paradigm now as this patriarchal society is kind of settling down, and there's been some power that's been now shared with the feminine. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think I'm very passionate about that. That's when I did one of my vision quests. That came to me as a calling, as I feel like a calling. I need to help participate in creating that balance again. I do want to say this though, is that this masculine imbalance doesn't necessarily need to be in a man's body. Masculine can be out of balance in a woman's body as well, and I think we're seeing some of that as well. We're seeing how that women are stepping up and being more manly and more masculine in some of their behaviors, and that's just a function of like this pendulum swinging back and forth. One of my insights on this, where I think I said earlier that the monotheistic religions really kind of brought and took the feminine out of it, whereas the animists had masculine and feminine as being honored both as part of God. And then even with, in the Catholic Church, it's Father, Son, Holy Spirit, there's no mother. So how do you have the Father and the Son but no mother? You can't leave that out, And so I think there was this like, probably conscious, it could have been unconscious, but it seems kind of conscious, erasing of Mary and the three Marys and the influence of the feminine in this story, where I think that needs to come back. And I think that another place where it was erased was a lot of people don't know this, but the United States was modeled, our governmental structure was modeled after Iroquois nations. And they had been one of the only group of tribes that formed a union. And they had been living in hundreds of years of peace and prosperity, whereas most of the other tribes were just fighting it out, over cows and, over land and stuff like that. These guys have formed a union, and so Benjamin Franklin took some of our founding fathers to study them and to learn from them. And their way of doing it was based on this kind of the premise of the Longhouse. And under the Longhouse, there were these great laws. And these great laws were universal principles that they all adhered to, no matter which tribe you're from. And so everyone had a seat around under this one big house, Longhouse. They each had their own sovereign territory, that this part of the house was your land, and it's kind of like a United Nations, in essence. And how they had created this harmony was through having a distribution of power, so no one person or one tribe could assert their will without it being agreed upon by the collective. So they had these different councils. They had the chiefs, and they were the very masculine energy, and then they had the shaman, which were kind of a neutral energy, and some medicine women and some medicine men, and then you'd have your grandmother's council. And each of these bodies would have to collaborate to make decisions. But the interesting thing was the grandmother's council had a couple of very high-level authorities. Like, they were the only ones that could approve going to war, and they were the ones that approved whether they moved camp or not. And so they had the tremendous authority. When Benjamin Franklin learned about this model, they took some of the ideas of the executive branch, would be the chiefs, right? They had the Congress, which would be the mix, right? But when they did the grandmother's council, which was the feminine, they eliminated the feminine. They kept the council, called them the judiciary, but now we have like this all mostly white men on the council for hundreds of years. We've had, in the United States, it's been this, the judges were mostly white men making the laws that reinforce the white men that are in charge, that are making the decisions in the executive branch. And there's no balance, that there's no feminine voice at the council. There's no woman at the fire saying, hey, this is what we need to think about. And the men weren't respecting that and bringing that energy. And so a lot of our society has gotten very, very hard, right? And it's lost its softness. So I think this Me Too movement is it's a natural, swinging of the pendulum. And I think what's important here is that we don't want to go from patriarchy to matriarchy. That's just a different sense of, the imbalance. What we're looking for is that harmony that they used to have, where the masculine and feminine were both honored for their differences. And so this is where we're at a stage right now where we're trying to learn how to find the balance there. And I think that what's missing is consciousness. And this is going back to your original question about compliance and patients being responsible for their lives. is that somebody can show up as an unconscious masculine and be very predatory, very, aggressive, can be, self-centered, and that imbalance is unhealthy and can be toxic. But a conscious masculine can show up with that same strong masculine presence, but a conscious masculine is going to create safety instead of create fear. A conscious masculine is the warrior that stands behind the grandmother and creates safety for her so that she can do what she needs to do with her sisters. A conscious masculine is somebody who can hold space during a difficult time. And a conscious masculine is someone who can really witness without judgment. Like really be there for somebody without making them wrong, without going into criticism, right? So that conscious premise that we want, and what is the conscious masculine? They're the provider, they're the protector, they're they create structure, they get stuff done, they're active, they are the hunter. Those are things we need. Those are elements of life that are critical. And we also need the soft side. We need the feminine magic, the feminine medicine, which is flow and creativity and nurturing. Like if you're just all drive, I mean, that's what happened to me is I created these masculine values. They were all based on extrinsic drive, and I'm burning myself into the ground. So I've had to find that balance between nature and harmony and nurturing and, taking time for myself. And now one of my best skills that I have right now in my life is when I'm blocking my time and I'm being very structured with my life and designing and being masculine, I block in space. I consciously insert flow. I insert time between events. I insert time between calls to have time for flow and rejuvenation. So even with structure, here's what I found is like, if you want to have flow, the best way to have flow is to get into structure. Like think about kids.
Yeah.
Right? If you want your kids to be really good, if they eat every 3 hours, get a little nap, and get a little exercise in, they're little happy little munchkins. But if you get them off of their flow, off of their rhythm, then they get all chaotic. And I think humans are the same way. We can find flow through structure.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because a lot of people think those are sort of separate, sort of exclusive. Well, I'm in flow, man. I'm doing whatever I want to do. But then having structure, I mean, you can have actually functional flow in that setting. The one thing that you kind of alluded to and what I see in your life as I witness it is that you do have a very healthy sense of work-life balance. And I think that's critical, and that's something that's really missing in our culture because of how we've been indoctrinated. That really this whole 40-hour work week or even more for physicians, other professionals, and people who have got 2 or 3 jobs is just not a healthy or sustainable mechanism for human beings. I mean, for you to be a true human being, you have to have that balance. I mean, you have to have playtime and downtime and self-reflection time, and then work and contribution time in society. The way it's going now, it's very destructive and it's very concerning. And I think that's really part of the healthcare crisis that we do face, is that mentality. It's that drive. Any other pearls of wisdom that you can sort of give to our listeners and viewers about how you've created the life you have now? Because you have a really nice life. I mean, you bilocate between 2 very beautiful areas. You're able to travel. You're able to engage in good social relationships and ultimately live pretty carefree, reasonably carefree. And that's good because you have a very relaxed demeanor and you're very present. I don't meet a whole lot of people that fall into that category.
Yeah, it's not. It's a life by design, and it didn't happen by accident, and it didn't happen overnight. So the tips I would say for somebody is first thing is to really get clear on who you are and what your values are, what matters most to you. Second thing I would say is to start eliminating things that aren't aligned with those values. Start being a life police where you're making your choices, start really taking responsibility for where you invest your time and your energy. For me, shortcut to accelerate my learning has always been finding a mentor, finding somebody who's got the life that I want, and then locking arms with them and learning from them. So find somebody who's that you can protege with, that you can mentor with, that has, and don't just look at their success, make sure that they've got the other areas. Don't just look at the career part of their life that they're successful. Make sure that they've got character. Make sure that they've got the values that you can align with, the cultural values. The other thing is give yourself permission to it might take 3, 5, 10 years to unwind a life that's been unconsciously designed. So the subtitle for my book, it's called Stoked, and really I'm stoked because it's going to be coming out in a couple months. It's called Stoked, a spiritual journey from employee to lifestyle entrepreneur. And that is a big journey from employee to lifestyle entrepreneur. And it's one of the most spiritual journeys I've ever taken, is to becoming an entrepreneur takes a ton of courage, because 8 out of 10 businesses fail within the first 2 years. That's just the stats from the labor, the Board of Labor.
It's a valley of death.
and many entrepreneurs, valiant is a great word, because they really go out with courage, saying, I want to do something. I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to break away from the rat race, the 9 to 5, and somebody else telling me I got 2 weeks of vacation. And they really have that courage to do that. And that takes a lot of courage. But, it doesn't happen overnight quickly, typically. And I've started, I think, 11 or 12 businesses, and a couple of them have been successful, and many of them have failed. And that's just how it is. You got to be willing to fail, and you got to be self-reliant. And that's a great article by Ralph Waldo Emerson. If you haven't read it, everyone should read that. It's awesome. So find your own beat of your drum and have the courage to chase it. Number 2, be willing to make mistakes and give yourself 5, 10 years to get there, to have the life of your dreams. But have the courage to know that if the current life you have is a result of all the decisions and the actions that you've made up until then, have the courage and the responsibility to realize that the life you're going to have in 10 years from now are going to be determined by the decisions and the actions you take between now and then. And there's no guilt, there's no victims. You got the life that you designed, whether you designed it consciously or unconsciously. You designed this life. You're the CEO. You're the one that every day makes a decision on 100 to 200 different things that are important. And you're the one that's made all the decisions that got you where you are. If you're happy with where you are, keep doing the routines that you have. If you're not happy with where you are, you need to change your routines. You need to figure out what you do want. You need to learn how to get yourself aligned with that on a daily basis. And it's about consistency. It's not about like big, giant changes overnight. That's why our theme for our company is like lifelong transformation, one healthy habit at a time. It happens in little increments, but it becomes, if you can make it a daily ritual. I'm a big believer in daily rituals, and there's a lot that people can do. But I think the biggest thing is to get clear on who you are, where you want to go. Surround yourself with people that are going to support you in that, especially a mentor who's done it. And then give yourself, 5 to 10 years to be a humble student and to master designing your own life.
Yeah, that's pretty pure wisdom. So I wish more people could do that. And I don't know really what that hiccup is, but I see it in so many folks that I deal with directly, that they're not able to make that paradigm shift. And I think a lot of it does really come back to being conscious, number 1. Number 2 is really having recognition that you have complete autonomy over the decisions you make, and taking responsibility for those decisions, and not scapegoating and or escaping the circumstance by going into something that basically either covers up or distracts you from the goals at hand, which are to live a well-balanced, healthy life that's full of rich experiences and beautiful things, and that comes on all flavors, shapes, and sizes, and it depends on who you are and what you find your desires to be. No, I think that's amazing. Is there anything else you want to add about your book? Because I know you're just getting ready to print it, release it. It's pretty awesome.
I'm excited. It's a fun story. It's a kind of a parable, loosely based on my life. Not exactly, but kind of some of the experience that I've had, some of the mentors. I feature a lot of my mentors in here. And it's really about how to be a great mentee, how to be a humble apprentice and a grateful apprentice. It's a story about a surfer who is so busy with his career that he doesn't have any time for surf. and he's overweight and out of shape, and that's kind of similar to me.
Yeah.
He was a pharmaceutical rep, and his top drug that he was selling was a weight loss drug.
Oh, interesting.
And the weight loss drug, this is very true in the industry, weight loss drugs have a terrible history of being recalled and pulled off the market for heart disease and suicide rates and all kinds of just terrible side effects. And so the drug that he was promoting got pulled off, and then his whole life collapsed. And so it's his journey to finding his real meaning in life and what he's going to do with the rest of his life. And he finds a surfer who's a mentor, and he kind of takes him under his wing, kind of like a Karate Kid. And he's teaching him how to surf big waves, and that's his journey. But along the way to pursuing this goal to surf big waves in Hawaii, he learns how to be a man. He learns how to be a conscious person, and he learns how to have that balance that we're talking about. So the book is it goes from the trilogy of the first one of the healthy body, mind, and spirit, which is the yoga community that is lacking the finances, to his trilogy, which is healthy body, mind, and finances. And then at the end, I mash them up together. And now I'm teaching, which will be the second book. There's probably going to be 3 books, I think, which is really going to bring in more of that spiritual component. So it's a journey that ends up being more spiritual than he expected, which is kind of what happened for me. It's like I had this passion for spirituality, but I never integrated it into my other areas of my life. It was kind of separate. And so that's what I think is unique about this book, is it's going to be an integration of those 4 pillars.
Great.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, so as we bring this to a close, I want you to share with our listeners and viewers just some basic wisdom that you've gleaned and things that they can apply. Some of it we've already talked about, but anything sort of in a nutshell, what could they do now to start to make positive changes in their life? Because you have espoused many different pathways and thought processes and rituals that could potentially bring people into a better space in their life. But if you can send them off with some little pearls, that would be helpful.
Sure. 2 things that have been just so valuable to me, and even with healing with my shoulders. As those of you that don't know, Dr. Sean did a PRP and stem cell on me, and I wasn't able to surf. And this is one of my biggest passions in the world. And for me, not being able to surf is the only thing worse than that would not be able to have sex. So it's okay, I got to get these shoulders working so I can get back in the water. And I was doing everything I could to heal. But one thing that I made a decision was to make my rehab not just physical, but to make it spiritual. And so I decided to create a morning ritual, a warrior ritual for me, to tap into that masculine energy to get my day started. So I have this morning ritual that I do. And you could do something, you could create your own morning ritual. That's what my recommendation is. Number 1, create a morning or an evening ritual. Something that you do kind of every day, brush your teeth, you get up, you do it. You have to wake up earlier, get up and wake up earlier. You do it before you go to bed, do it before you go to bed. But create a ritual. My ritual is I use the Wim Hof breathing to activate my body. You can just look up Wim Hof on YouTube, and he's got a phenomenal thing. I do 5 minutes of yoga stretches from warrior poses, yoga stretches. And then I have this routine that my trainer gave me for my shoulder routine. This is for quarterbacks and pitchers. Drew Brees uses this routine, just to give you an idea. And it's a 15-minute prehab routine for my shoulders. So I integrated, and then I finish with a haka prayer. And the haka prayer is the Maori warriors that do, before they play rugby, they do that. Yeah. Kamate. So that's I do that to just activate. So that's my ritual. It takes 15, 20 minutes, but every day I get myself connected to the earth, connected to my warrior, and really grounded, and I activate that. So having a morning ritual or an evening ritual to get you into a spiritual practice. So I made it that it wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. It's part of my spiritual practice. And now by integrating it in, it's become locked in. That's one thing. Another one would be meditation, or breath awareness, or just simple. There's lots of different things people can do to just kind of calm their mind and give yourself time to go within. Remember, I said that, maybe we're always looking outside for everything. If you could get into a habit, this would be great to do again in the morning or at night, to do a little bit of a 5-minute. If anyone's interested, I have an app. I'm beta testing it. It's going to be coming out with my book, where we have a 7-day challenge, a meditation challenge. The first day is only 5 minutes. The next day is like 10. The next day is 12. So it gets a little bit longer as you go. But go on YouTube and search a 10-minute meditation and get yourself into a habit of every day, like right when you get out, before you even get out of bed, get yourself ready to, before you go and get your day going, take 5-10 minutes to get into a meditation ritual. Before you go to bed at night, same thing. Either way, get yourself into a ritual. That would be my simplest, biggest transformational tip I could tell somebody to do.
Great. No, that's awesome. Greg, I just want to say thank you so much for coming in and taking your time to sit here and explain some of this stuff. I mean, you have been a fount of wisdom, and so I really do appreciate that. We're going to have you back, and I'll have some of my co-hosts here, and maybe we'll do some round-robin work. And this touches on so many things that we've talked about in past shows and hope to explore further in future episodes. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me, and I really appreciate the work you're doing here on the Medicine Wheel. It's a powerful integration of the ancient traditions of holistic health and the cutting edge of state of the art, like the most modern kind of Western medicine you can provide. I think it's unique that you have that holistic view, and I really, that's why you're my doctor.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're trying to blend all these worlds. I think there's so many important things that we can link together, and integration's key, and really being open to learning, and like you said, being a good mentee. And I'm always looking for my next mentor, and I have plenty of them to thank for the journey that I've been on. So. It's been great, Greg. So listen, for all you guys that are watching out there, The Medicine Wheel, we want to thank you again. If you want to learn more about Greg Rex, his book and his journey, please visit our website at themedicinewheel.org. Until next time, namaste.
Namaste.
The Medicine Wheel encourages all of our listeners to subscribe to our newsletter and podcasts as we continue to explore the world of medicine, bringing you up-to-date health and science information. The Medicine Wheel invites our listeners to email us any newsworthy stories or topics they wish to explore further and discuss on the podcast. For more information about the Medicine Wheel, please visit us at our website, www.themedicinewheel.org, and on Facebook, and finally on Twitter and Instagram at The Med Wheel.
In an effort to support access to integrative medicine and functional medicine options for those in need and education for those who need information, please consider donating to Project OmCare, 501c3.org. Please go to our website, www.themedicinewheel.org, to learn more.
Thank you again to all our local sponsors, Grateful Gardens, Lighthouse Coffee, and Dorinda's Chocolates, which represent some of the best organic and appetizing options in the Reno, Tahoe area.
Lighthouse Coffee Shop is a proud sponsor of the Medicine Wheel. We are a family-owned and operated local coffee shop. Our goal as a business and a family is to cultivate community wherever we are. All of our coffee is ethically sourced, organic, and farm fresh. It's roasted in-house daily, guaranteeing you access to the freshest cup of coffee on the planet. We care deeply for our community and everyone in it. We strive to provide you with the best ingredients and most comfortable environment. Come and enjoy coffee with us. We are family, and we would love for you to be part of it.
Gerber Medical Clinic is proud to support the Medicine Wheel and medical education to improve health quality, nurturing the lifestyles of our listening community, enhancing wellness for all. Thanks again to Wired Insights and their talented team for making our podcasting dream possible.
In closing, we would like to remind all of our listeners, if you have a medical concern or diagnosis, you need to see your personal doctor without delay, and if needed, obtain a referral to a specialist. If ever you feel the health issue you have is urgent or an emergency, please call 911 and go to your nearest emergency room. Please do not take any of our physicians' commentary or our guests' opinion as medical advice, and always seek out medical care from fully licensed and appropriately trained medical professionals in your area. The information shared in this podcast is for general information only and should not be construed as medical advice, and understand that no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and educational materials linked to this podcast and website are employed at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not meant to be used as a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
This is the Medicine Wheel signing off for this week with a reminder to live, love, listen, and learn.